how long do I think the war's going to go for? I don't know. Every day I think this could just be the day where some deal is reached like that and it's done. Or it
Yeah.
could go on for years. I don't know if people have the appetite for it to go on for years, but we're into the third year and it's not looking like it's going to stop anywhere soon.
How can I help? How can I be useful in ending needless suffering? Do not be afraid of work that has no end.
We have to organize a social movement.
We have an opportunity to lead by example versus just talking, hot air.
I think the more people in this fight, the more we grow. Eventually it could change. The people are the ones that can make the change.
Welcome back, everybody, to Change Agents, an Ironclad original presented by Montana Knife Company. Today, we're going to be focusing on the work of independent war journalist Matt Willy Williams, who has reported from the front lines of the war in Ukraine for the last 2 years, and most recently from Lebanon. Matt is an Australian military veteran, serving from 2014 to 2021. A few months after returning from a deployment as a crew commander in Afghanistan, he was diagnosed with an incurable and inoperable brain tumor. Since being discharged from the military, he has dedicated his time to not only raising money for cancer research, but also reporting from conflict zones. Let's dive in. To be honest with you, I wanted to talk equally about your experience as a war correspondent, but even more than that, man, I'm fascinated by the brain tumor that you were diagnosed with and how that kind of shifted your optic on just life in general. So bring me up to speed, give me the wave tops or whatever depth you want to, just kind of on your life and your experience up to the day that you were diagnosed with that.
Yeah, right. So look, I grew up in rural Victoria, Australia. So, rolling hills, dairy cows, very simple sort of upbringing, not much outside of small towns and maybe small cities. Public schools, good mates, playing football, usual sort of just boy stuff. Never very good at school because I always wanted to join the army. Like that was just what I was doing. From being in year one at school through to year 12 being, the final year of high school in Australia. It works a little bit differently here to middle school, or however everything works in the States. But you're 18 at that point, and it's like I'm joining the army. And from where I lived, not many people really joined the army from there. We, of course, Australia is a massive country with very small population, same size as mainland US, very similar if you exclude Alaska, Hawaii, but a 15th of the population. So from where I am to where the bases sit is a long way. So like not that many people joined just due to that. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And I joined. Originally, I wanted to go direct entry special forces. Now we have two primary special forces units in Australia. We've got, of course, more than this, but this will make it more simple. You've got the SASR, which is the Special Air Service Regiment. Everyone will be familiar with 22 SAS, I'm sure, with the Brits. Tier 1 unit, good to go. And then we've got another unit, which is the 2nd Commando unit, also Tier 1 unit, Special Forces Hitters. That one you can do direct entry into. But a lot of the direct entry is actually for guys, at least at the point when I was going through recruiting, was for guys that had previously served, say, in the infantry or as a combat engineer, or guys who are a little bit more old. So at 17, 18, when I was joining up, it was like, hey, mate, look, let's be honest with this. You're probably not going to make it through that course with zero military experience prior. Like you've never picked up a weapon. I'm Australian. I'd never touched a weapon before that in my life. Maybe a shotgun out at the farm, but that was about it. And it's like, you're going to be going up against dudes who have been doing this for years. They just got out. And it was incredibly competitive. This was 2013, 2014, right off the back of, all the fighting in Afghan. So you got a lot of guys getting back in, wanting to buy another car from Danger Pay for a deployment. So yeah, I joined the Australian Infantry. From there, went through the training pipeline, which is fairly similar to the US. We did a 3-month basic training, and then it's about, I think it's 15 weeks of then infantry, like rifleman training. And then, you join your battalion. And then I went through specialty for heavy weapons, then combat first aid course, which is like a level up from, I guess, your basic just medical training that everyone receives. Little courses here and there. I will say from my experience, and I know I'm heavily biased, but the level of training for the average soldier between what I've worked with, between, say, the American infantry and the Australian infantry and the British infantry, I do believe that the level of training is, say, a little bit higher for, say, the Australian average grunt. And that's not to rag on anyone. I think it's due to having such a small population. We then have to have guys that are really over a broad spectrum of different bits of kit and different tactics because of where we're sitting in the world and having a population of 26 million dudes. We have a tiny army. It's like, we need dudes who really know what they're doing and can step into a different area in, say, long-range patrols in Australia. Like, there's more American combat soldiers in Australia out at the US bases than there are Australians at any one point. And then I deployed to Afghanistan on a tour in 2017. And I was a protected mobility vehicle crew commander. So your American audience to be familiar with like an MRAP. We operate the Bushmaster, which is like a better version of the MRAP. I'm sorry, I'm biased again.
It looks cooler too. I've seen them. They look cooler.
It looks cooler. The survivability is better. And the from everything coming out of Ukraine, it's like they prefer that one anyway. But anyway, I'm just it's talking shit. But I commanded one of those for, say, just over 8 months in Afghan. And look, my military experience compared to a lot of the guys you'll have on your podcast is very, very limited. I got in at a sort of coming off the back of Afghan. We weren't there in a full combat capacity at all. Yes, we're a warlike tour, but it wasn't, kicking indoors and bloody coming out of choppers like some people imagine everything in Afghan is. But that is it is the proper 1%, maybe 5% of soldiers that actually end up doing that sort of stuff. And people don't, I guess, understand that. But I
would actually argue it's closer to 1% than to 5%, even in the U.S. military. There's a drastic misunderstanding of the role of just your average, and I don't say that negatively in any stretch, just your average military member. Not everybody is running to the sound of the guns. It's not even the job of the vast majority of people in the military. Having said that, those that do run to the sound of the guns couldn't do their job without everybody else. So, it takes a village for sure.
Oh, 100%, man. So, it's probably more like 5% of a combat unit, like of the infantry, 1% overall. But my aspiration from day dot in the army was, passing through that special forces entry test selection course and all of that. And, to get a couple of years under my belt and to go into the SAS in Australia. Of course, anyone can look up on YouTube. There's a really good documentary on it called The Search for Warriors. It gives you a really good breakdown of that course and what's needed in it. So I'd spent, most of my career, sort of mid-career, and then through my deployment, because you'll never be fitter than when you're on a deployment, depending on your deployment, but you're not out drinking with the boys. Actually, it depends for some.
I was just about to say sometimes.
Regular grunts aren't out drinking, mate.
Occasionally, we would visit the Brit or the Brit or Aussie compounds because although we were not allowed to have booze, we knew people that were.
Yeah, I don't think many of them were either. But
fair enough.
That was always the goal. So I put in a heap of training time, a heap of everything, primarily fitness stuff and courses that would then support that. But that sort of went tits up for me when I got back off that tour. I did some promotional courses, did some traveling on leave, and then I was diagnosed with my brain tumor. So I guess to bring us up to that point, that was at day dot of that. That was like, look, my career's probably coming to an end because of this. Increased risk of having seizures, of course, increased risk of bloody dying early. But all of that came through, as well as a massive impact, I guess, on my mental health and stability at that point too. And there was just no way at that point. I'm not sure how the American system works, but we have like a downgrading system of medical. So to be fully deployable, fully, operational, we call it like J11. That's like top fitness, and it goes through to J51, stepping down. And instantly at that point, I was like J31, like undeployable, like what's going on in your brain. Completely fair enough. Like if I was the rank command looking at me, it would have been like, Willie, you've got a golf ball in your head, mate. So yeah, that all unraveled for me very quickly.
So what is the tumor? I know I was reading in the show notes that it is inoperable and incurable, but what does that mean for you? I mean, what did the doctors tell you? What does the long-term prognosis look like?
Well, I guess anything is operable. It's just more if the prognosis is going to be better or not. So
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. You could just start cutting. And like the doctor has said, if you had this on your arm, we would just cut your arm off and you'd be all right. But brain is very different where it's sitting. So yeah, at the moment it's considered inoperable because like obviously my hands and feet and everything move. I can run around. So by them operating, I would have a worse outcome than them operating at this point in time. Now, again, that graph may actually meet somewhere and go, we can try and cut it out and, something may happen, or you're going to die from this in a month. So, at some point it may actually become operable, if that makes sense. Yeah. But at the moment, no. And incurable is basically because it's a problem on my 19th pair of chromosomes that is there as well, of a mutation too, causing a tumor like this. No matter what they do, even if they had, the best surgeon in the world could come and cut it out, and this, you got to remember, you're cutting at cellular level of brain tissue as well. It would then come back, and brain tumors, being the bastard that they are, they almost have a bit of a mind of their own. They typically come back worse and more aggressive. It's almost like they know they've been. These things, man, are like the biggest prick in the world because, and I'm not trying to say victim, poor me. It's not that at all. But these mainly affect children, and it kills so many kids. Like it kills more kids than any other disease in Australia. Anything else, it kills way more kids of this. And the diagnosis, the prognosis is just horrible. The amount of treatment for little kids is so shit house. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Like there's not much they can do because it's in the brain. You're dealing with such fine things. I've had the doctor explain it to me. Some of these tumors, he said, imagine you get an orange and you get a syringe full of red liquid and you put it in and you squeeze into the orange. That's what we're trying to cut out. He's like, I guess theoretically it's possible, but I'm in there with a scalpel, man. It's brain tumor, it's brain tissue, it's tumor tissue, all mixed in like this. And that barrier between them can get very crossed over. We don't have a firm barrier to cut, and you don't want to be cutting out much brain tissue. And the tumors themselves, particularly in young people, a little bit younger than I, one of the best and worst things about the brain, and that's a fantastic thing, and you can listen to someone like Huberman talk about this, is like neuroplasticity and how the brain can pick up and move parts around the brain. And in really young kids, you can see them have a neuro issue, and it completely moves, like say your left frontal lobe, say, controls your hand. But a kid may have a problem there, and it's just moved where that piece of brain is to control the hand. It's an amazing thing, and surgeons may know a little bit of how it works, but if we knew how it fully worked, we'd have a cure for a lot of stuff. But with the neuroplasticity as well, the influence on that will cause better outcomes in the future. So there's a lot of hope there. But at the same time, the older you get, the less and less sort of plastic your brain is. So your recovery from this isn't as well. But what I'm saying in this too is that brain and the tumor is still brain tissue. It's not foreign body in there. It's cells from there that are, growing out of control. Mm-hmm. So that tumor can actually pick up some of the control of pieces of your body as well, at least to a degree, at least the blood flow through there. So you can actually find that the tumor is part of the brain that is controlling a piece of you. Now,
Oh, wow.
where mine is, and I had what they call a functional MRI. I'm very lucky where I live. There's a functional MRI machine, which is very rare, at least to the degree that this one is. I think it's the only one, or maybe one of two in the entire Southern Hemisphere. And I actually wasn't in there for any amount of treatment for me. They asked me to come in for medical research. Like, hey, we'd actually like you to come into this machine for about 90 minutes in the full MRI thing. It works a little bit different, a functional one, but we actually want to see what's going on. And that a lot of the sort of neurological signals actually go through my tumor that control my right arm. So cutting that out, it's like there's good cells in the tumor that are controlling pieces as well outside, like your arm. And of course, this gets much worse if it's your heart or your lungs.
Yeah.
So they're just a bastard of a thing. I'm very on the spectrum of, if there's good and bad tumors, mine's a lot better than some others. But again, these all signals, it's a event horizon, say something like mine. Like, it's not getting better. At the moment, it's not growing much. I can have a scan on it every couple of months. And the neurosurgeons, man, I really feel for them, because they deal with either extremely bad circumstances, like a motorbike crash and they're doing spinal surgery, or they're delivering people bad news every single day. Say a neurosurgeon, like my neuro only does brain and only does like tumors. And you're like, well, you're not delivering many people good news. Like, you're like, not often, like you might be some, but like with me, and what I'm saying in this is they become pretty like savage. Their bedside manner compared to a GP is incredibly different. But it is.
Welcome in. You're fucked. All right, moving on.
a little bit, man. But you can see why. And they're very strapping down with like, every 3 months, like, hey, Matt, Willie, this hasn't, it's grown only a little bit this couple of months. And, that's happy for me. And I'm like, look, don't want to rain in your parade, but this isn't going to continue like this. I've had one of my surgeons told me that it would be 5-ish years I'd survive. And we're at 6 years now. So it's hard to get a judgment. Most have said around a decade. Some are unwilling to tell me. Like, some are like, I have no idea. Like, most have said, a few have said, like, to get an average on this, the numbers would be completely skewed, because there's people that rock up with this who are 80. There's people who rock up who are 8 months old. There's people that come that are heavy smokers. Like, but there's not enough numbers to get a good average. So just keep doing you, and we'll see how sort of far we can sail the ship with a hole in the side of it, which is sort of how I approach life at the moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Montana Knife Company, a brand that I am very fortunate to know quite personally. They're 120 miles south of, literally 120 miles south of directly where I'm sitting right now. American made, right here in Montana, which makes sense given the fact that Montana is in the name, by the youngest master bladesmith ever in the US, Mr. Josh Smith. Now, if you're familiar with Montana Knife Company, you understand the struggle. It is getting harder and harder to actually get one of their knives. If you've ever gone online on one of their Thursday drops, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I have literally had knives taken from me out of my shopping cart as I am completing the purchase. I believe that either Josh or Jess are doing this personally. I have no data to actually prove that. But there is good news on the horizon if you have been through this struggle with me. They are planning to release 12 new models between right now and the end of the year. 4 of those are going to be in their military/tactical space. He's already released one. It was called the War Goat, and I'm lucky enough to actually have gotten a hold of one of the prototypes. This one actually wasn't stolen from me, Josh. It was actually given to me by Josh, so I can't really say too much negative about it. This is my everyday carry. This thing is in my fanny pack. You can talk smack about fanny packs if you want. It's where I carry all of my things. But this thing is awesome. Everything about this knife is everything I love about the brand. Quality and construction. They continue to evolve in their quality. The actual final product itself is unbelievably durable. It's unbelievably lightweight. I take it with me everywhere. I never get in knife fights except for with cardboard boxes. And that's the way that I'm looking to live the rest of my life. It's a fantastic brand. I love everything about it, and I love the people who are behind it. If you want to support them, go check out MontanaKnifeCompany.com. And Thursdays, try your luck. Try to get one of their knives. This episode of Change Agents is brought to you by MTNTOUGH. I've done a few things in my life, not all of them physical, but there is one thing that I believe. When I have been successful, it has largely been because of the physical capacity and capability I had at the time. The brain is what solves the problems, but it's only as good as the chassis that it is built upon. And that is what I think the value of strength and conditioning, or conditioning in general, is for everybody, regardless of what it is that you do. If you want the muscles, or the muscle, I should say, between your ears to work at peak performance, you need to focus on everything from the neck down as well. The cool thing about MTNTOUGH, or some of the cool things I should say about MTNTOUGH, is you can do it anywhere, right? You can, if you have an internet connection, if you have a device that connects to the internet, you can find the workouts that are suited for you. And it doesn't matter what level of conditioning you're starting, they have a program that works for you. Then there's also a community of people that can help hold you accountable, that you can interface with, ask questions, and join. And I mean, we all know that doing something arduous is better when you're sharing that suffering. Camaraderie, right? It's a combination of pain and laughter. That's my description of it. And some of these workouts hurt. That's okay. The benefit from that is worth it. If you have a community to share it with, it's going to keep you on board that much longer. So MTNTOUGH is offering Change Agents listeners an incredible offer. 40% off on the all-new MTNTOUGH Plus annual subscription with the code CHANGEAGENTS. The way that I'm looking at that, it's one word in all uppercase. Go to MTN, that is Mike, Tango, November, Tough, regular spelling.com, and enter the code CHANGEAGENTS to receive 40% off, a savings of about $100 on your MTNTOUGH Plus annual subscription. That's MTNTOUGH.com, and enter the code CHANGEAGENTS to save 40%. That's less than 50 cents per day for the best-in-class physical and mental training available to you. How did, knowing that you have an expiration date like we all do, I think average humans who especially don't go through a diagnosis like you went through, we really push that clock that is ticking down, I think would probably be the more accurate, not ticking up. We push it off to the side. You get that diagnosis and then you dive into being essentially a war correspondent. And like we had talked about right at the very beginning, you own 5 sets of body armor all over the world because you have to refresh your stores because, Australia is what it is. It has the laws that it does. Yeah. But how did you find your way into that? Because obviously that occurred after this diagnosis. And I'm just curious what it was that drew you into that type of experience or life.
Oh, dude, I was lost. That's what it was. I was a career soldier. Like, if I wasn't going to be in X unit, I was going to be the sergeant major of another unit. Like, I was a career guy. That's all I wanted to do. And I'd never thought of anything outside of that. And then, I was medically separated from the Defence Force. And they hung on to me for a long time. They hung on to me throughout my chemotherapy. They completely looked after me. Like, I know a lot of people rag on the way of DVA, but the VA system, my experience with the Australian system and my diagnosis was, I'm telling you, it could not have been better for me. I went through 13 months of chemo, all this other crap, different oncologists, different doctors, everything. No one ever blinked an eyelid if I requested something. I'm the 1% in this, but I had a really good run through. So I was with the Army for a long time, and eventually it came to, look, I need to be medically separated out. I'm not recovering from this. This isn't an ACL injury. So I came out of the Army and I didn't know what to do with myself. I was there and I was, receiving a small pension, as a lot of guys do, getting out medically, which actually can be the worst thing also, because you can be like, well, I don't need to do anything. I can just sit around on my ass. You never actually, you sort of become an eternal victim, because it's like, well, I'm that injured, I get paid, I never have to do anything again. Now, I know that doesn't stand for everybody, of course, but there is a degree of, like, I think sometimes that actually may be more of a curse than a blessing long term. Because
I agree. It's a dangerous trap.
Yeah.
It can be a dangerous trap.
Oh, absolutely. The best thing I've ever done for my mental health, my physical health, everything, is getting back out again, whether that would be into just a normal workplace and being social, but not falling into that I'm too unwell or too sore or too broken to do something. So basically, man, I was like, I was making some YouTube videos and whatever, and talking about some topics that interested me. And I was like, look, let's see if I can actually, do what I have a passion for, and that is military style things. And see if I can, mix these two together. I can talk shit. I think I've got a pretty realistic grasp on just topics. And I think there's this new wave that's opened. And if you're just reasonable, and this is comedians are like this. I'm like, someone gets on stage and just speaks a reasonable sense into things, and they're a world famous comedian. Nothing that, Shane Gillis is saying is groundbreaking. It's just like, reasonable things has now become funny because so much is just irrational. And the media is the same. That the media can be so irrational that if you just get up and say, this is probably what's happening, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle and there's a bit of fog around it, most people actually think like that. Like, most people are very rational, and the irrationality is pushed by other irrational things like media, or social media, or maybe even education systems. And I was like, look, I think I'm fairly rational. I'm just going to go. And at this time, it was before the 2022 Russian invasion into Ukraine. I'm just going to go to Ukraine and talk to a few guys that work in like private industry about like, look, where's sort of kicking off, and look, just go. I just flew over there, and I was about 4 or 5 weeks before the invasion, and I was just going around with my camera, no real idea what I was doing, just filming and talking about things I saw of build up or certain groups working or this and that, and then went through, and then just by luck, the invasion happened, what I guess catapulted, my career a little bit, because I was right place, right time. Right place, right time, but I was still in I increased my odds dramatically than sitting in Australia. Sure. So it's right place, right time, luck, but you also have to make your own luck. You'll never be anywhere unless you actually sort of put yourself in the arena. And that then all happened, and I guess I got a following, and I've done some reporting from on the ground in many different areas, as well as a lot of reporting back here too. And I'm actually sort of changing to, I think maybe my skills more lie in the analysis style, maybe in my office, which isn't as exciting, but it's a lot easier to pick through and do a lot of research and what specific, just picking at that thread to find something. But yeah, I sort of fell into it, man, and I had some early success, which was, a lot of luck. But it was a massive shift for me.
How does, before we dive into Ukraine and kind of what's going on over there, I'm curious, how does the Australian press or media describe the conflict?
Look, mate, to be honest, I'm probably not the right person to ask. My exposure to Western mainstream media is, especially Australian, is actually very limited. That could be the healthiest approach. Yeah, I use it because they get good interviews, and I'll use a quote or something of because they will interview Zelensky, or they will interview, Trump or whatever. But as far as overall, how are they seeing it? Look, it is incredibly on the pro-Ukraine side, and that is the stance they've taken. Same as the governments, it's very in line there. I don't see much pushback in the Western mainstream. I should say Australian mainstream. I don't see much pushback on some of the Ukrainian stance on things, and very in line with the government, which sometimes I think can be concerning. And this isn't just Ukraine. This can be for a certain illness or whatever. If the government and all the media is in full agreement on something, it doesn't mean they're incorrect, but ask some questions. have a little look behind the curtain and go, yeah, right.
Historically, there are reasons to drive you towards cracking that curtain just a touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple historic, and by that I mean all of them, coincidences that you need to actually take a look at there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been to Ukraine. You were there for the conflict. You've interviewed a lot of people that were on the ground there. What have you found?
Too? I spoke to some Wagner PMC guys, some Russian. Yeah. So that's an interesting perspective there too.
What do you think people who will never have the opportunity to go there and talk to these people and rely only on media, and I hate to even say that because some people think that just straight YouTube is news or TikTok. When you say the media sources, it's a buffet platter that people get to choose on their own. But for people who will never have that experience talking to those on both sides, what are they missing? What are the misconceptions that you have seen that the vast majority of people just don't seem to understand because they don't really have that legitimate access?
Yeah. Well, something that is absolutely everywhere of what I've seen, whether it's from Afghanistan to my time in Syria, in Israel to Ukraine, wherever, the majority of people in the world are good people. Now, of course, there's people that do bad things, there's people who do evil things, but the majority of just human beings are good people. And I think that is something we need to, be where we need to start a lot of, how we assess humans. We can't just assume someone is then evil. Now, there's also this idea that, Russia and Ukraine are completely separate countries in religion and language and all of this and history, and that isn't the case either. Yes, there are differences. Historically, there are differences between Ukraine and Russia too, but Ukrainians and Russians are much more similar in language, histories than, say, Australia and Russia and Australia or Ukraine. So you need to say there's some similarities there as well. Every Ukrainian I know speaks some Russian. It may not be their native tongue, especially if they live in the West, like west of Ukraine, but they speak Russian too. They're Orthodox Christians. So there's a lot of this. And an understanding too, there needs to be a realistic approach to Ukraine and the government. And this isn't to bag on it, because coming out of a communist Soviet system takes a long time to, I guess, weed out the bad players in that system. And it's longer than 30 years. A lot of army communities have this too. You end up with these guys who are warrant officers or lieutenant colonels or whatever that are just hanging around. And you're like, fuck off. You sort of need them to die out or retire out. And these systems have a lot of that sort of, I refer to it as the Soviet hangover in it. So there's this idea, and I think this is dangerous because I think it actually does damage to Ukraine. At least operationally, it does damage. There's this idea that Ukraine is democratic, freedom of press, corruption like Denmark. People, they think it's like that. And you're like, you obviously have never gone there. Ukraine is deeply corrupt. There has been overthrows of government recently. It is very poor. Now, this isn't a bag on, but we need to take that into account when we're looking at what information comes out and what may be playing on that. And we need to look at that, especially with large sums of money or certain grants that are happening and how that will then be used. We can't just approach this like, where it's like the same as looking at democracy in Switzerland or corruption in Switzerland or blah, blah, blah. Now, this isn't then saying Russia has massive, insane issues with the same stuff, but to talk on Ukraine, because the West points all that out, like the Western media, but they're not pointing out, hey, there are real problems in the Ukrainian system as well. There are people getting killed by intelligence services early in the war and dropped on the street. That doesn't happen to the same degree, at least not as obvious in the West, in NATO countries. We don't have that to the same degree. As well as, these units, they're old KGB units, they've only been out of the KGB 30 years. So, where it went from the USSR and you had the KGB, the directorate there and out from it. So there's sort of this hangover, but I think people need to step away and be like, what is actually realistic here? What actually is the government like versus, what we're being told? Because I think one of the problems with this is if you approach it like this is a completely non-corrupt government and then you fund in however you will, or you view it like that, it has an operational cost at the other end, because the boys in the ground might be like, no, if you're just funding this to that, the money's never going to come to us. So I think the more realistic people were, it actually would have a better frontline effect than just ignoring a lot of this shit. But any critique of Ukraine is seen as that you are a Kremlin bot, you are Putin's best mate, and that is a huge problem that has occurred. Is now any criticism of Ukraine, which can be very important. Criticism is incredibly important in warfare of, hey, this operation didn't work. How do we fix it? It's more important than just hand shandies, you're doing great. But any criticism, you're instantly seen as just a Kremlin, you're sucking up to the Kremlin, you're Putin's mate.
Yeah.
Of what is shut down of any of that, and especially from other leaders, bloggers, media, has caused a huge problem in then operational standards, I believe, at the front too.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're describing it as a chessboard where Ukraine is the white pieces. They're pristine, altruistic, stand for truth and freedom and justice and integrity. And then Russia, of course, would be the black pieces, which is, evil incarnate and everything wrong with the world. And I think it's fair to say that the more likely color for both pieces is gray, a combination of the two. But yeah, that's a much more complex topic to unpack on TikTok, which is a media source for some people, than the conversation we're having right now.
Oh, mate, I could bang on about the problems there for hours, but like I said at the beginning, that most people are good, and I'll be the first one to say I think Ukraine. I love Ukrainian people. I love Ukraine, the country. Fantastic. I spent many months there, had a fantastic time. But the government is a different story. And how there is operation there too. And that is still something that needs to be careful of. I completely agree that this is Ukrainian territory and this. But on the other side, you can go, but if you were sitting in Putin's shoes, can you have some perspective on how he may be feeling? Now, if you even bring that up, instantly, apparently you are, pushing Kremlin propaganda. And you're like, no.
Yeah, you're a Kremlin bootlicker. Yeah.
Yeah. The same with the Taliban. I completely see the Taliban's perspective and how young kids ended up joining the Taliban because these blokes in camouflage and guns have flown across the world. They're in my country fucking around. Okay, fuck off. I'm joining this and doing that. You don't need to be pro something to actually see then the perspective of the other side.
Yeah. Understanding does not equate acceptance. And I think if we spent more time trying to focus on an understanding and seeing the world through other people's eyes, or at least attempting to, at least making an attempt to view other locations or situations or things going on in the world through the eyes of those actually experiencing it on both sides, we'd be better off. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to rally for them and fundraise for them, but I think it would give you a little bit more of a well-rounded approach to a lot of the stuff. Are you surprised that the war has lasted as long as it has?
Oh, yeah. When I was there in the first days, man, when they, you first see the Caliber cruise missiles come in, it's like, oh, this is going to be done and dusted in a couple of days. Because, the military power of Russia at the time of what we thought, I thought, and the comparison I would have given at the time is if the US was like, we're invading Mexico. That is what a lot of people thought it would look like. A couple of weeks and it would be over. And I actually believe that some of the senior command in Russia thought the same thing. But I also think they thought they would be more welcomed with open arms. And many people are saying they sent an occupation force in the beginning. They didn't send an invasion force. Look at Kyiv, for example. The Russians sent maybe 50 to 100,000 troops in the direction of Kyiv. That is not even close to the amount that you would need to invade a heavily defended city of, I don't know, Kyiv is 4 to 6 million people. You're not even close to that amount that you're going to need. That they thought, like in 2014, in some areas, they'd be sort of welcomed with open arms and occupy rather than a full-fledged invasion. What goes against, a lot of Russian doctrine, sort of Clausewitzian ideas around like total war. So, yeah, I think that was those massive losses we saw in the start and crippled Russia for a number of months with those huge losses in the beginning. But I think we have seen them get back on their feet significantly recently. They really had, if you look at like attritional warfare doctrine of they basically took what they needed, they reinforced, and they've had a good 12 months off much active fighting throughout 2023. We had the Ukrainian counteroffensive, but as far as Russian offensives, and in 2024, they have been on the offensive basically this whole year. so far. So I thought it would be much quicker. I think Russia probably believed it much quicker. I think Ukraine and all the Western officials thought it was going to be quicker too. The 3-day idea, that's from Western intel guys. Like that's not, that whole like, oh, it's going to fall in 3 days. That was us. That our assessment was this. How long do I think the war's going to go for? I don't know. Every day I think this could just be the day where some deal is reached like that and it's done. Or it could go on for years. I don't know if people have the appetite for it to go on for years, but we're into the 3rd year and it's not looking like it's going to stop anywhere soon.
What's going on, everyone? This episode is also brought to you by Allegiance Gold. Gold prices have surged, reaching nearly $2,500, a 20% increase in under a year. With traditional investments under scrutiny, gold and other precious metals have become attractive alternatives. The rise in gold prices reflects growing skepticism towards conventional investments and highlights its stability. Notably, even banks are increasing their gold reserves, underlying its lasting value. Gold isn't just a short-term play, it's a long-term strategy for financial security and growth. Whether you're an experienced investor or just starting, gold should be a part of your investment portfolio. Start securing your financial future with Allegiance Gold, a trusted leader in precious metals with top ratings from TrustLink and an A+ accreditation from the Better Business Bureau. Allegiance Gold can help you protect your IRA or 401k with physical gold and silver, or delivers precious metals securely to your doorstep. If that sounds interesting to you and you go to protectwithandy.com today, listeners will get an exclusive lowest price on the market for select gold bars. That is protectwithandy.com, or you can call 844-790-9191 to talk to an account representative.
What are your thoughts on Ukraine now is actually into Russian territory?
I think they needed to do something. If you look at, and I do this every day, I release a 20 to 40 minute video every single day on movements. If you look at the movements this year, Russia has built very, very effective, very deep defensive works throughout the east of Ukraine and all through the south. This is where Ukraine's counteroffensive, the now infamous counteroffensive in 2023, fell over. It went into these massive multi-layered defensive works, largest defensive works we've seen since the World Wars, and couldn't make any substantial breakthrough. Maybe got through the first line, but there's 10 other lines behind that. And since that point, Russia's just reinforced and built and built and built on those defensive works that I don't think there's any military in the world in a conventional sense could actually push through some of those defensive works. Like tactically through there, you're going to have a strategic play to have maybe draw guys away. If Ukraine, in my belief, is if Ukraine just stayed in the regions that they were, Russia would have just ground away at that front line until there was a collapse. They needed to do something. And that is what we've seen, that they have seen a hole in the Russian line of, their assessment with, it would have been with Western ISR and intelligence come through and go, this would be the spot to do it. Satellites have flown over, not much defensive works, mostly conscripts on the border. Right. Let's have an offensive in. And Ukraine is, occupying of Russia somewhere between, say, 500 and 1,000 square kilometers. Now, I know that is a large sort of gap in what it could be. It's very difficult to assess in the north at this time, and it's the 15th of August for anyone who is wondering. So this is the info going off.
It's good. Put a timestamp on it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard to actually get an idea of how much ground that they are actually holding. But just because we see a Ukrainian DRG, like a reconnaissance or sabotage unit, pop up somewhere, that does not mean they actually control that territory. We can't draw a line of that's where it's being held. And people will say, it's hypocritical then to say Russia control this in the south. But well, a grinding offensive forward, it's much easier to say this is under control than that. So there's a broad idea of how much they hold. But they've taken a lot of POWs. They've inflicted large losses on the Russian forces, and they've gained somewhere between 74 and 100 small villages at this point. Will that be holdable for the Ukrainian forces there? I don't know. Many have said that this is a short-term win for, I guess, a long-term loss. That, okay, you've pushed across here. but Ukraine is the side that doesn't have the numerical numbers on their side. What you've effectively done is lengthen the front line further. Lengthening the front line, that helps to side with the more numbers. And Ukraine for the last 6 to 12 months has been talking about non-stop. There are massive manpower issues, dropping the age of conscription, that they can't recruit more men. There is a manpower shortage, and that isn't going anywhere quickly. So I don't know if that is in their best interest. And many people will say, and I'm sort of on this, that Russia may just dig in a new defensive line and go, oh, great, you occupy this 1,000 square kilometers, but you're going to have to occupy another 1,000 square kilometers with the threat that we could have a push on this and we'll just keep grinding somewhere else. So I think it needed to be done. It needed to show the West that Ukraine could actually make ground. Ukraine hadn't had a net positive change in ground since the end of 2022. Now, you had the Ukrainian counteroffensive, but that was not net positive due to other Russian offensives that year. They needed to show the West they were capable of actually winning and seize and hold areas. I think another thing that's not spoken about as much that it did do is Ukraine has had a huge problem with leaks within their military intelligence services. Not spies in the traditional sense, but people that may be more sympathetic towards Russia and leak things. So the whole 23 counteroffensive was leaked, as far as we know. And there's been many leaks like this. What it has shown is the OPSEC around that push in the north, that was seemingly tight as, like it was airtight. So it does show Ukraine, right, we may have flushed out anyone in our at least senior command who would leak that. So that's a really good sign as well. They've taken a lot of POWs, primarily of conscripts, but if you do a one-for-one swap, you might be getting back, a well-trained fighter, and Russia's getting back some 18-year-old that was dragged off the street. So there are wins in this. It's just difficult at this point to see, will this be a net positive or will it be a net negative? And it is high risk, high reward. And it is high risk because if Russia managed to get control of that border and you're in 70 kilometers at some areas without logistics, that's not a great sign. And we are seeing just today, we have seen significantly more Ukrainian assets being taken out in the north by Russian drones, primarily MRAP, protected mobility style vehicles. We're seeing a lot more of that today than previous days, now that Russian reinforcements are starting to arrive. And Russia digging defensive works beyond this, that brings into the idea the Russians may be okay with, if you want to lengthen the front line, that works for us. We'll lengthen it, we'll forgo this amount of territory, and we will kick back. Now, people will say, Ukraine may be getting ready for a November peace. I don't want to say peace conference. It's probably not the right word. They might call it that. But to me, if you have a peace conference, a negotiation at this point, it needs to actually take into both sides' reality on the ground. And that would 100% at this point mean that there will be some land concession by Ukraine. So many people have said what they're trying to do is take some Russian land. So if that comes to that negotiation, that they will have a swap back. Now,
that chips on the table.
Yeah, because before this, Russia held every single card. Before this, they had Russia occupy these areas. They've got more troops. They've got more artillery. They've got the air power. You go to a peace, and they're advancing on the front. You go to a peace conference like that, you're going to go, we're not giving up shit. We have the initiative at the front. Now, at least in the north, Ukraine have the initiative and they occupy ground. But what I will say is, let's say, just for instance, Ukraine occupied 2,000 square kilometers of Russian territory. Right. Compared to the amount that Russia occupy, that's still a very, very small amount. Just Crimea itself is about 26,000 square kilometers, and the total occupied territory is about 100,000 square kilometers. So the swap back of that ground, if it is kilometer for kilometer, even if it's 2-to-1, 3-to-1, it's still not that much if you were to go into that aspect. So I'm not completely sold that that's what the goal is, but it's not completely clear to anyone yet what the goal of that what the objective of that northern push actually was. A guy said to me, one of my contacts, it was to get to, right up to Kursk, to try and swap back a major city, but that actually hasn't occurred that quickly. You're talking more like 70 Ks in. So it's hard to know the objective of the Ukrainian forces there. Maybe there's something more that we will see. People, of course, will theorize about the nuclear power plant that sits in Kursk. I've always been a little bit, I guess, pessimistic to that. I don't believe Ukraine, with the PR fallout of attacking a nuclear power plant militarily, I don't think anyone could sell us as a good thing. Like even like, the CNN.
That's a tough look.
It's a tough look.
A tough look.
Well, it's a tough look, but Zelensky's 10-point peace plan, which the Western world says is the only way forward, is Zelensky, Ukraine's 10-point peace plan. Number 1 point is nuclear safety. And I'm like, well, you couldn't do that and then come to a conference in 2 months' time and go, hey, we had a military objective on this. So I don't believe that was the case. I could be wrong in that. And this is something I'll say with everything. I could be wrong. It's just my reading and gut feeling on the ground. But we will see. Time will tell us. But it could be the greatest victory or the greatest failure for Ukraine. It is high risk, high reward at the highest stakes to be pushing your best elements across the border there, because they are really well-trained, Western-trained elements heading into there. And we have seen not only ground continue to fall in the east by Russia, but actually accelerate. If you look at what we call the Pokrovsk front at the moment, which is like a center hub for the Donbass, one of a couple, the Russian advancement there has sped up. They've accelerated because of this in the north, because troops are being pulled away from there. And I think there is this race at the moment for who needs to reinforce a front first. I think the Russians are hoping that Ukraine will see them advancing westwards in the east and go, we need to pull out of Kursk, pull out of Russia to reinforce this, to stop it falling. And I think the Ukrainians are saying, we need to keep pushing into Kursk to make the Russians pull away from this front so we can stop that advancement. Again, high risk, high rewards, but I don't have all the information that the generals might have on the table.
Talk to me about the Chosen Company.
Yeah, Chosen Company, oh, man, it's a really hard to get an idea because I've got so many guys in my ears about different aspects of this. But what I will say with any foreign fighters, and a lot of my interviews, probably the majority are with guys, foreigners who go and fight in Ukraine. Some are there for, it depends what you want to call it. I'll call the right reason is I'm here to defend Ukraine. Some are there for that. Others go to Ukraine to pick up girls. A lot of people went to Ukraine before the war to do that. And some are there to get some photographs sitting in a bush around Kyiv to pretend like they're bloody in the war zone somewhere to raise money, but they can go nowhere near the front line. Chosen Company, a group of Westerners, Western trained guys, mostly ex like infantry guys. They have sort of put themselves as this, like the benchmark for foreign fighters. The Foreign Legion had so many issues. Coming under a Ukrainian command structure can be a problem with a change in tactics and language barriers, of course, so that they are this group that can almost work as like a supporting element to Ukrainian offensives. Now, if you have a group of guys who are under no official command structure, like at the end of the day, yes, you might have Ryan in charge, but this isn't like an official military rank structure with everything in, with patches and like we have in the military and someone has pips and a crown, and it's not like that. You get a group of, young guys, some of them lost, some of them looking for glory, others there for maybe the right reasons. You get them all in a group, you are going to have problems. And, you don't have senior command or command looking down upon, maybe issues that will occur, both, I guess, as far as crimes and as far as then just social relationships between guys. Things can get out of hand very quickly. And that's what we have seen unfolding in the past weeks is massive claims and allegations of war crimes, of trying to like frag someone. We've seen claims and allegations of this. It's hard to get a grasp on what's what. And then I've had guys who serve in Ukrainian forces also reach out and go, we are sick to death of these Westerners because all they hear is raising money and they make us look bad. That they find it so much easier to raise money than we are. And half the time they've spent in arguments on Twitter. Now, I'm not saying chosen. I'm just saying foreigners. It can be like that, and there can be a real hate from some of the Ukrainian units of like, okay, we want you here to help us, but you can't also just be here and bitching and moaning about internal politics of your unit. That doesn't help anyone. So chosen's a hard one. I'm not fully over it enough to speak on whether those crimes did or did not occur. Are war crimes systemic across the front line perpetrated by both sides of this? Yes. Go on Twitter, have a look at any piece of drone footage, have a look at whatever. You'll find it in 30 seconds. You will find it. If a guy's on the ground with his hands up and you drop a grenade on him from a drone, that is a war crime. I don't care what you feel about that guy. He has surrendered. If he's injured, he's horse to combat, he's whatever, which is you can't then target him. Oh, but he can't surrender to a drone. Yes, you can, because we have shown in footage, Ukraine had footage of guys surrendering. Now, is it completely doable at that point? Maybe here or there, but at the end of the day, it is. And there are clear examples, and we've seen executions by the Russians and this and that, and horrific stuff. So do war crimes happen? Yeah. Will they ever be investigated by, some governing body over Russia and Ukraine? No, it won't happen. There's been too much of it.
Well, who does the chosen company report to? I mean, they're Western soldiers. What military architect or infrastructure are they working underneath and reporting? Like, who is holding them responsible?
Well, they are under the Ukrainian forces. Now, Ryan would be he would know more than this on me. And actually, him and I are speaking in a couple of days specifically about some of these questions. But they are under the Ukrainian command, and some of there are investigations going on as well into some of this by, I'm being told, by Ukrainian authorities as well within Chosen. But this is one of the problems, is you get some of these groups that it's like, who do you report to? Sort of no one. And then you end up with a lot of these bloody problems. And there was dudes going there, man. There was guys going to Ukraine in the early days, buying an M4 on the street for a couple $100, buying a vehicle and driving out to the front line and seeing if any of the boys needed help. Hey, do you guys need someone with a gun? Yeah, sure, jump in. Now, I can't blame the Ukrainians for saying that. If I was in Ukraine's boots, I would have done the exact same thing. If some bloke rocked up who looked like he knew what he was doing with a gun, I would have been like, jump in this fucking trench with us, mate. We need all the hands we can get. But of course, then you start having a lot of issues with this. And we have seen, and this has nothing to do with Chosen, but we have seen allegations of foreign soldiers getting killed by other foreign soldiers. And there are arrest warrants out internationally as well for some guys doing that, as well as, soldiers rocking up with their hands tied, drowning in puddles, 500 Ks from the front line. So there is big problems there, but at the end of the day, it's what is actually going to occur here. I don't know. I don't have high hopes for it. I know some guys are wanting international investigations to open against Chosen or this unit or that unit. Will it actually happen at this point? I don't believe so. Because are those videos we see of executions or drone drops by Russian forces, Ukrainian forces, is anyone looking into those? Everyone turns a blind eye to it.
I also worry
a blind eye to their side.
Yeah. I also worry that it would be impossible to find some of those people. I understand the desire to want to fight for what you believe is correct, for what your moral compass points you towards. I was watching one of your interviews with a recent one, I believe. Actually, it was from a year ago. You were talking with a Marine that had showed up over there, and before he was fighting ISIS, and before that he was in the fall of Fallujah. And I don't know how old the person is, but I could do back of the envelope math, and it seems like he spent most of his adult life fighting against whatever he has determined morally that it needs to be fought against. When the Ukraine war comes to an end, however it does, you're not going to be able to find that person because he's going to be off in the next fight that he's looking for. And they continue to fight and fight and fight. And I worry and wonder about the foreigners who go there or to any other conflict. And it's not for me to tell people whether or not to do that. But do you truly believe, or do you just want to fight? Yeah. And if you spend your entire adult life in that environment, I'm not sure you can ever actually leave it and come home.
Bro, I did an interview with one of the boys who I actually knew from the Australian Army, and he was like, "Oh no, I'm here just because I want to fight." I'm here because the army's not going to send me on a tour. I'm here because I can take out a Carl Gustav and potentially shoot a T-72. And it was as open as, I don't really give a fuck whose it is. This is the shit I'm trained to do. I don't give a fuck. And I see footy players, like football players, might be like, I don't give a fuck who I play. I just want to play the fucking game. I've trained for this. I don't care who I'm tackling. And that is the attitude of a lot of these guys. Mate, some of the guys I've spoken to, interviews from, like, say, Wagner PMC, they say the same. They're like, oh, no, so whoever's paying the most, and we'll fight. Regardless, we'll go and do it. And you bring up a good point. There are guys who will just go and fight and fight and fight. But I also have said to guys, both publicly and privately, be careful with not only, it's one thing fighting, but it's another thing having a complete online presence of doing this as well.
Oh, for sure.
History has not yet been written on this war. You don't know how this will be looked upon in a decade, in 2 decades, in 5 decades. We have no idea. We have no idea what our relationship with Russia will be down the line. And people will go, we won't talk to them for 100 years. Look at Japan and Germany. And like it or not, what Germany and Japan did in the Second World War is so much worse than what Russia has done. And and I'm not then saying, oh, therefore Putin, go for it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying those who compare Putin to Hitler or Putin to Stalin or Putin to whoever you want, is a ridiculous thing to draw together. And it doesn't make him look worse. It actually makes the atrocities committed by, say, the Nazis, it actually makes them potentially look better. It doesn't paint them as the evil, the stain that it was on humankind. And I say to them, be careful. You're publicly online. You don't know how this will go in the future. You're posting your face. You're, posting fuck Russia and, dead body and this and that. Be careful with some of that because, well, the FSB and SVR, they're not ones who haven't, taken out dudes before in Western countries. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but I'm saying just be careful on some of this, as well as down the line where you go, jobs, everything. Maybe just think twice about posting online. Go and fight, do what you want, but just be careful when your whole presence, everything is about that. You can find out information about anyone online straight away. And people think, oh, I changed my name around. I put the first letter as my last name. These are intelligence services. They can get around that shit, man.
There's software out there that can solve all those problems just from a facial recognition perspective.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, but the relationship with Russia into the future, I think, will be a very interesting piece to how that will actually look. Cheap energy, the rise of the global south, the gateway from the global south into Europe through Russia. A relationship needs to be made there. People aren't going to like it short term, but I believe relationship eventually is going to have to pop up.
Yeah. Willie, we completely blasted through our time and I could care less, but I'm curious, what do you want to leave people with? I'll give you the closing thoughts.
Ooh. Look, I think just think for yourself and you're okay to have a different opinion to other people. We're in such a binary world that it is said to be non-binary, but you're either right or left, or you're right and you're wrong, or you're Russian or Ukrainian, or you're pro-Gaza or pro-Israel or whatever. Think for yourself. You can have perspectives on both sides of an argument too, and you can be friends with people on both sides of the argument or both sides of the coin as well. It doesn't mean that that is everything that you're tunneled into. And maybe just try and open your eyes a little bit to things more. Try and see perspectives, and try and think about things as critically as possible. Don't start your assessment with a conclusion in mind, because everything beyond that will get blurred. If you start your assessment of the Russian-Ukraine war as Ukraine is going to win or Russia is going to win, seeing frontline movements, you will get blurred in exactly where that's going to go if you're trying to actually assess it militarily. So try, you are probably smarter than you think you are, and don't be too influenced by people that may say that you are wrong, but also look into why they believe that you are wrong as well, if that makes sense.
No, it does. That's good advice for things well beyond just this type of conflict.
Yeah.
If you'd like to learn more about Matt's work, please check him out on YouTube. The direct link to his channel is in the show notes below. Thank you again for tuning in to Change Agents, an Ironclad original presented by Montana Knife Company. See you next week with an all-new guest and episode.
Started skating when I was about 5 years old. When I first was in the academy for the police department, I always kind of like envisioned myself bridging the gap between skateboarders and policing. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it yet without even actually trying. It was like 3 or 4 months later, I just saw a bunch of buddies, old buddies, over near the Raven at the ocean front. So I walked up in uniform. My buddy recognized me, obviously, and just slid me the board. Nobody else knew I skated at the time. Did a kick flip and then a tray flip, and that was caught on video, and then it kind of exploded from there. Next thing I know, I'm like looking at my phone, and the Barracks reposted it, which was huge. I always watched the Barracks as a kid. Tony Hawk reposted it, ESPN, and it just kept growing. My earliest memory of skateboarding was my dad skateboarding out in front of a parking lot, and me just, sitting and watching him. But unfortunately, he wasn't really in my life much, so I didn't have much guidance as a kid, and skateboarding kind of replaced that and was almost like that second family. I didn't have anybody to teach me to like go hunting or fishing or throw a ball. It was more so like I just grabbed my board, met up with my buddies, and that's all we did day in and day out. We'd skate 2-3 hours in the morning before our summer school bus picked us up. Inside summer school, all we would do is write down tricks and ideas and spots we wanted to hit to film. When I first started doing this and doing community events and skateboarding in the police department, a lot of people think I'm, bridging the gap for, skateboarders and police officers, for skateboarders to understand that cops aren't all bad and hate skateboarders, but in reality, I think I'm more so changing the perspective of actual police officers and showing them that, skateboarders are just athletes, normal people. And just to kind of get that, like, skateboarding is a crime mentality out of the way. I'm Ryan Christian. People know me as Officer Borman with Virginia Beach Police Department.